Yeah.
James Clear himself is like a walking example of this idea.
Oh, how so?
Well, back in high school, he had this
Mm.
really intense experience, a near-fatal baseball injury.
Oh,
We're
wow.
talking broken bones,
Yeah.
facial fractures, the whole works.
That's rough.
It took him months to recover,
Yeah.
not just physically, but mentally too.
It's amazing how he was able to turn that experience around.
Yeah,
Instead of letting it define him, he used it as fuel.
totally.
He turned to the power of habits to rebuild his life and ultimately achieve some incredible things.
He really did. He found success academically and even became a successful entrepreneur.
It really makes you wonder,
Yeah,
what could we accomplish if we harness that same power?
that's the question, right?
Right.
And that's exactly what we're exploring today.
Yeah. Okay, so no magic overnight transformations.
Nope. Sorry to disappoint.
Okay.
It's not about those drastic makeovers you see in movies.
Got it.
It's about understanding the power of tiny changes.
Okay.
Those little 1% improvements we make each day that add up over time.
Okay, so tiny changes, big results.
Precisely.
Got it. So let's bring it down. Let's say there's a habit you want to change, something you've maybe been struggling with for a while. Time to put on your detective hat.
Okay.
We need to figure out the 4 stages of something called the habit loop.
Interesting.
First, we got to find the cue.
The cue.
Yeah, what's the thing that sets this habit in motion?
Uh-huh.
What triggers that familiar behavior?
Okay, I think I'm following.
So the cue's like a signal to your brain that there might be a reward coming.
A reward.
Yeah,
Interesting. And for our ancestors, those cues were about survival, right?
exactly.
Things like finding a source of fresh water.
Yes. Or a fruit tree bursting with ripe fruit.
But these days, our cues might be a bit more modern.
Right? Like seeing a notification pop up on your phone.
Ah, yes. Or the chime of the email inbox.
It's like our brains are constantly scanning for these cues,
Hmm.
these hints that a reward might be just around the corner.
Right, I get it. But it doesn't end there, right?
Nope, it
All
doesn't.
finished?
The craving kicks in. That's the
Ah.
motivational force behind every habit.
So it's like your brain saying, gimme, gimme, gimme.
Exactly.
I want that reward.
Right. So, picture this. You're walking past your favorite bakery,
Mm-hmm.
and that warm, delicious smell of freshly baked cookies hits you.
Ooh, I love that smell.
The craving is that urge you feel to go in and buy a cookie.
It's magnetic.
It really is, and that craving leads you to the response.
It is.
The actual habit itself. You walking into the bakery and buying that cookie.
Okay, so cue craving, response.
You got it. But here's the real kicker, the reward.
It's the best part.
It is.
Yeah.
It's what makes us want to repeat these behaviors again and again.
Interesting. So in this case, it's
The taste of that delicious cookie and the satisfaction you feel after eating it.
like a little party in your brain.
Exactly, because it got what it wanted. And guess what?
Right.
The more those parties happen,
Mm-hmm.
the stronger those neural pathways become,
Interesting.
making it even more likely that you'll repeat the habit next time.
So it's a cycle.
It is cue, craving, response, reward, reinforcing the whole loop.
What if one of those parts is missing?
If even one piece is missing, it won't become a habit.
So like no cue,
No habit.
a weak craving,
No action.
difficult response,
Not gonna happen.
and an unsatisfying reward.
What's the point of doing it again?
Makes sense. It's like a chain reaction.
Yes,
Each stage has to be strong enough to keep things moving to the next one.
exactly. Being aware of this loop is crucial. It's like becoming a scientist, studying your own habits,
I like that analogy.
understanding the why behind the what.
But what about the role of our sense of self in all this?
That brings us to one of the most fascinating ideas in the book.
Ooh, tell me more.
It's called identity-based habits.
Identity-based habits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clear argues that real lasting change doesn't come from setting goals.
Right.
It comes from shifting your identity.
Oh, wow.
So instead of saying, I want to lose weight, you start saying, I'm the kind of person who prioritizes their health.
So it's about embodying that identity,
Yes.
living it out through your actions rather than just focusing on the end result.
That seems incredibly powerful.
It is, but it's not easy, right?
It's not like flipping a switch.
You can't just decide to be someone new overnight.
Exactly. How do we actually make that shift happen?
Well, think of it this way.
Okay.
Every time you make a choice, you're casting a vote.
A vote.
Yeah, for the type of person you want to be.
Interesting. Clear uses this really cool example.
What is it?
Have you heard of Laszlo Polgar?
Laszlo Polgar, the chess master.
The one and only.
Yeah, the guy who raised his 3 daughters to be chess prodigies.
Exactly. He basically created this environment where chess was woven into their very identities.
Wow.
They were homeschooled, surrounded by chess books.
Oh, wow.
They were constantly playing and competing.
I could see how that would shape them.
It wasn't just something they did.
Yeah.
It was who they were.
And the results speak for themselves.
They do. All three daughters became incredibly successful in the chess world.
It really shows the power of aligning your habits with your desired identity.
It all goes back to that feedback loop we talked about.
Your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits.
It's a powerful cycle.
They reinforce each other over time.
So we've covered the habit loop and the idea of identity-based habits.
What's next?
What about the role our environment plays in all of this?
Our surroundings. Well, it turns out
Yeah.
our environment shapes our behavior way more than we realize,
More so realize.
even in the smallest ways.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you're trying to eat healthier. Wouldn't it be easier if your fridge was full of only healthy foods?
It makes sense.
Right.
It's like setting yourself up for success before you even start.
You're removing the temptation.
Making those cues for good habits easier to spot and the cues for bad habits harder to find.
Exactly. And Clear talks about this idea of one space, one use.
Oh, what's that?
It's where you dedicate spaces for specific activities.
Interesting.
Your office is only for work,
Oh, okay.
your bedroom's only for sleep, and so on.
I see.
This helps your brain connect specific cues with specific behaviors.
That's clever. It reminds me of when I used to work from my couch all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It was a disaster for my productivity.
I can see how that would be a problem.
It was like my brain couldn't switch off work mode
Yeah.
because the environment was always the same.
So it's about being intentional with our spaces.
It is. By rearranging furniture, decluttering, creating designated zones for different activities.
Exactly. We can make a real difference in our habits.
It's like we're subtly influencing our behaviors without even realizing it.
And this is super important when it comes to breaking those pesky bad habits.
Oh, how so?
The trick is to make those bad habits as hard as possible to do.
Okay, make it difficult.
Exactly. Increase the friction.
Increase the friction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like unsubscribing from those tempting email lists.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Or putting your phone in another room when you need to focus.
Out of sight, out of mind.
It's about outsmarting those impulses.
Making it harder to give in.
And to illustrate this, Clear brings up this fascinating historical example.
Ooh, I love a good history lesson.
Have you heard of John H. Patterson?
John H. Patterson, the cash register guy.
The one and only. He invented the first cash register.
It's a pretty incredible story how he came up with that invention.
It really is.
It revolutionized businesses.
Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
It's the late 1800s.
Okay.
Patterson owns a saloon.
A saloon.
Yeah, and employee theft was a huge issue back then.
Oh, I bet.
There was no good way to track transactions.
So employees could easily pocket some cash without anyone knowing.
Exactly.
Mm.
But then Patterson stumbles upon this ad.
And an ad.
Yeah.
For
This thing called Ritty's Incorruptible Cashier.
Ritty's Incorruptible Cashier.
Yeah, the world's first cash register.
What did it do?
It was brilliant, really.
Yeah.
It would lock the cash and receipts inside after every transaction.
Wow. So simple, but so ingenious.
It was.
Same with hat.
Employee theft at Patterson's saloon vanished overnight.
Really?
Yeah. It's remarkable how changing the environment,
Right.
making it impossible to engage in the bad habit, had such a dramatic impact.
It wasn't about willpower or hoping people would suddenly become honest.
Nope.
It was about changing the game entirely.
It's a powerful reminder that we have the power to either enable or disable our habits.
Based on the environment we create.
Exactly.
Okay, so environment is key.
It is.
But how does dopamine fit into all of this? Yeah, I've heard it's connected to habits, but I'm not sure I fully get it.
Dopamine plays a crucial role.
But it's not just about pleasure, right?
Right. It's not just about feeling good.
Okay.
It's about anticipating rewards.
Anticipation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's what gets us to take action.
So like the excitement of potentially getting a reward.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And you know what?
What?
The modern world is a dopamine factory.
Oh, tell me about it.
Everywhere we turn, there are cues promising pleasure and satisfaction.
Our phones buzzing with notifications, social media, that never-ending stream of dopamine hits.
And let's not forget about the food industry.
Oh, man.
They've become masters at hacking our dopamine system.
Wow.
Think about all those processed foods.
Yeah.
They're designed to be hyper-palatable.
Extra flavoring, the perfect crunch, that irresistible fizz.
They send our dopamine levels soaring.
And that's why resisting those temptations is so hard.
It really is.
Our brains prioritize those immediate rewards.
Even when we know those choices aren't good for us in the long run.
It's like our present self is in a constant battle with our future self.
Yeah.
We know that whole bag of chips isn't a good idea. But in the moment, the pleasure of those crispy, salty chips outweighs everything else.
Exactly. So we need strategies.
Strategies.
Yeah.
To do what?
To make those good habits more instantly rewarding
Okay,
and those bad habits less instantly gratifying.
I see.
We have to tip the scales.
In favor of the choices that align with our long-term goals.
Right.
So how do we do that?
How do we outsmart our brains and make good habits more appealing in the moment?
That's the million-dollar question.
Well, one effective technique is habit stacking.
Habit stacking.
Yeah, have you heard of it?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, it's all about leveraging the power of your existing habits to build new ones.
Give me an example.
Sure. Like, after I brush my teeth, I will floss.
Ah, I get it.
Or after I make my morning coffee, I will meditate for 5 minutes.
So you're basically using an already established routine as a springboard for a new habit.
Exactly. You're piggybacking on an established neural pathway.
Makes sense.
It takes the guesswork out of when and where to do the new habit.
But what about those habits that aren't inherently enjoyable, like paying bills on time?
The not-so-fun stuff.
Right. It's not exactly exciting.
Even with less enjoyable tasks, you can get creative with rewards.
How so?
Well, think about what really motivates you.
Good question.
Is it a sense of accomplishment? Treating yourself to something you enjoy? What works for you?
I'm a big fan of checking things off my to-do list.
And
And maybe a little bit of dark chocolate every now and then.
So maybe after tackling those bills, you reward yourself with a small piece of dark chocolate.
Okay, I like that.
Or a relaxing bath.
Or a relaxing bath.
It's about finding ways to make the experience more enjoyable.
Adding a little sprinkle of positive reinforcement to keep you going.
Exactly.
I'm all about positive reinforcement. But let's be honest, sometimes even small rewards aren't enough.
Right.
We need something more to help us stay motivated when that initial enthusiasm fades.
That's where habit trackers come in.
Habit trackers?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
People use apps or even just a calendar
Oh, okay.
to mark off the days they stick to their new habits.
Makes sense.
It's incredibly satisfying.
How so?
Well, you can visualize your progress.
Oh, I see.
You see those check marks or filled in squares, and it feels good.
It's like a visual reminder of your commitment.
It is.
Your dedication to becoming a better you.
Plus, there's that element of gamification.
Gamification.
You know, like a game.
Oh, okay.
You don't want to break that
It
strip.
becomes a little competition with yourself.
Exactly.
A friendly competition.
A friendly
I'm
competition.
all about that. And speaking of games, what about temptation bundling?
Temptation bundling.
It's like a clever way to trick yourself into doing those less than thrilling tasks, right?
It is.
How does it work?
Let's say you love binge watching your favorite show,
Mm-hmm.
but you also know you should be doing more housework.
I feel seen.
Okay, so with temptation bundling,
Yeah.
you only allow yourself to watch that show while you're folding laundry or doing the dishes.
So you're basically turning a chore into a treat.
Exactly.
Brilliant. You're telling your brain, hey, if you want this reward, you got to do this task first.
And it works because it taps into your brain's reward system.
You're associating something pleasurable with something less enjoyable, making
Right.
the whole experience more appealing.
Exactly.
So we've got rewards, habit tracking, temptation bundling. Any other tricks up your sleeve?
Don't underestimate the power of accountability.
Accountability.
Yeah.
Like having someone to answer to.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
can really help keep you on track, especially when you're feeling less motivated.
I can see how that would be helpful. It's like having a cheerleader in your corner.
It is.
Someone who celebrates your wins but isn't afraid to give you a nudge when you need it.
Precisely. It's about building a support system.
So you know that someone else is aware of your goals and invested in your success.
Right.
It's like those fitness challenges people do with their friends.
Mhm.
They support each other, cheer each other on, and keep each other accountable.
It's amazing how all these seemingly small strategies can lead to big changes.
They really can.
It's all about consistency and finding what works for you.
But what happens when we hit a plateau?
A plateau.
You know, when our motivation dips, our progress slows down, and those doubts start creeping in.
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
But for now, remember, plateaus are normal.
They're not a sign of failure.
Not at all.
Okay, good to know.
They just mean we might need to switch things up a bit.
Find new ways to challenge ourselves and keep things interesting.
Exactly.
I like the sound of that. So until next time,
Yeah.
Remember, it's all about those small steps, those tiny adjustments that add up over time.
And you don't have to be perfect.
Just 1% better every day.
Keep those habits atomic.
Atomic habits.
Welcome back to our deep dive into atomic habits.
We just finished talking about how our environment and even our brain chemistry can help or hurt us when it comes to building those habits.
But sometimes motivation takes a dip.
Yeah, it happens.
And progress feels slow.
It's easy to get discouraged.
It is.
And start wondering if those small changes are actually making any difference.
It's like hitting a wall in a video game.
Ooh, good analogy.
You're putting in the effort.
Yeah.
But you're not leveling up as quickly as you were before.
It can be frustrating.
How do we push through those moments and keep moving forward?
It's a good question. Remember that Goldilocks rule we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah. The one about finding that sweet spot of challenge.
Exactly.
If a task is too easy, we get bored.
Right.
Too hard, and we get discouraged.
It's all about finding that just right level of difficulty.
It is. Think of it like working out.
Okay.
If you lift the same weights every day, your muscles adapt.
And you stop seeing progress.
You hit a plateau.
So you need to keep challenging those muscles to make them stronger.
Exactly. Like progressively overloading them.
But how do we apply that same principle to our habits?
Let's say your daily walk has become too easy.
Okay.
What could you do?
Maybe find a more challenging route.
You could.
Add some hills.
Yep.
Or just increase my pace.
Exactly. You're raising the bar, pushing yourself a little further.
Like leveling up in real life.
I like it. But what if it's not the habit itself that feels stale?
What do you mean?
What if it's the lack of visible progress that's the problem?
So you're putting in the work,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not seeing the results you were hoping for.
It's important to remember,
Yeah.
progress isn't always a straight line.
Sometimes it feels like you're flying,
Exactly.
and other times it's like you're barely moving.
We're in this for the long haul.
Right. Not looking for quick fixes.
So patience is key.
Don't get discouraged when those results don't show up overnight.
Patience and flexibility.
Flexibility.
Sometimes we need to reevaluate our approach.
Okay.
Try different techniques, or even get some guidance from a coach or mentor.
It's like being a scientist, in a way.
It is experimenting until we find what works.
That makes me think about those times when you're trying to build a new habit, but you just don't feel like it.
The motivation just isn't there.
Yeah, how do you overcome that and bridge the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it?
This is where showing up becomes essential.
Showing up,
Yeah.
even when you don't feel like it.
Especially when you don't feel like it. Remember, motivation doesn't always have to come before action.
Wait, so you're saying I should just do it even if I don't feel motivated?
Sometimes we just need to show up and do the work.
Even when every fiber of our being is telling us to stay on the couch.
Think of it as casting a vote for that person you want to become.
Interesting.
You're telling yourself, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is what I do.
I can see how that shift in mindset could be powerful. It's not about waiting for motivation to strike.
Nope.
It's about acting as if you're already the kind of person who embodies that habit.
Exactly. And you know what often happens?
What?
Motivation follows action.
Really?
Yeah.
So once I get started, I might actually start to enjoy it.
Often, that initial resistance fades away.
Okay, so show up consistently, even when it feels tough.
But what about when boredom sets in?
Even with exciting goals, things can start to feel mundane after a while.
This is where we need to learn to fall in love with boredom.
Fall in love with boredom. That sounds tough.
It can be. But remember, mastery takes practice.
And practice often involves repetition,
It's about finding satisfaction in the process.
not just the outcome.
Exactly. Think of an elite athlete.
Okay.
They probably don't love every single training session.
But they understand that all that hard work is what leads to success.
They embrace the boredom, knowing it's a sign they're on the right track.
So instead of viewing boredom as the enemy,
We can see it as a sign of commitment.
a sign that we're in it for the long haul.
And it's important to understand something about our brains.
Okay, what's that?
They evolved to thrive in what's called an immediate return environment.
Immediate return environment.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, our ancestors would take action.
Like hunting or gathering.
Exactly. And they'd see immediate results.
Food on the table, shelter built, dangers avoided.
Right. Instant feedback.
But the modern world is different.
Very different.
It's more of a delayed return environment.
Exactly. The consequences of our actions often take time to show up.
Like studying hard for a test and not seeing the payoff until weeks later when you get your grade.
Exactly. Or consistently investing in your retirement fund.
And not reaping the full benefits until decades later.
And this mismatch between our ancient wiring and our modern world can make it tough to stick with good habits.
Especially those habits that require consistent effort without those immediate rewards.
So we need strategies to bridge that gap.
Make those delayed rewards feel more real, more present.
Exactly. How do we make those long-term goals feel as compelling as those immediate gratifications?
It's a great question.
We need to connect with our future selves on an emotional level.
Connect with our future selves.
Yeah. One way is to visualize the future we want.
So picture myself achieving those goals.
Vividly imagine yourself experiencing those positive outcomes.
Okay, so if I'm trying to build healthy eating habits, I can imagine myself feeling energized and confident in my body.
Yes.
Enjoying delicious and healthy meals, having the energy to do the things I love.
It's about creating a powerful image in your mind.
Something that evokes those positive emotions and fuels action in the present.
It's like a movie trailer for the life you want to live.
A compelling preview that pulls you forward.
I like that. But visualization alone might not be enough.
What else can we do?
We can use a technique called future authoring.
Future authoring, what's that?
It involves writing a detailed letter to your future self,
Okay.
describing the life you've created, the person you've become,
So it's like writing a letter to the best version of yourself.
the version you aspire to be.
Outlining the steps you've taken, the milestones you've reached.
Exactly. It's a concrete commitment to your future self.
A promise to follow through on your aspirations.
It's like signing a contract.
With your future self.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And it ties back to those identity-based habits we talked about.
By writing to our future selves, we're reinforcing the belief that we're capable of change.
Right. That we're actively becoming those people we envision.
It's about aligning our present actions with our future aspirations.
Bridging the gap between who we are today and who we want to be.
Okay, this is all really fascinating.
It is right.
But what about the role our genes play in all this?
Our genes.
Yeah, some people just seem to have a natural advantage when it comes to certain things.
That's a common question, and it often sparks debate.
Nature versus nurture.
But it's not an either-or situation.
It's both.
Our genes provide a blueprint,
A predisposition.
but it's our environment and our choices that shape who we become.
So how do genes factor into this habit-building process?
Well, certain genetic variations might make us more or less sensitive to certain rewards or punishments.
Interesting. So some people might be genetically predisposed to crave sugary foods.
While others might naturally gravitate towards physical activity.
So if I have a constant sweet tooth, it might not be entirely my fault.
It doesn't mean you're doomed to struggle.
Okay.
It just means you might need to be more aware of your choices.
And create an environment that supports healthy eating.
Right. It's about understanding your predispositions and working with them.
Not against them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and tailoring your approach accordingly.
So if someone has a natural inclination toward physical activity, they might find it easier to build an exercise habit.
Than someone who's more sedentary.
It's about playing to your strengths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Find activities that resonate with your natural abilities.
And if we can't find a game that favors us,
We can create one
we can design our environment, our identities.
to support our goals.
So our genes might play a role,
They do.
but they don't have the final say.
We have the power to choose our actions.
Our habits.
And ultimately, who we become.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Overcoming plateaus, connecting with our future selves, the role of genetics. But there's one thing I'm still curious about.
What's that?
We've talked about making good habits more appealing.
Yeah.
But what about breaking bad ones?
That's the other side of the coin.
How do we make those unwanted behaviors less enticing, less automatic?
It's a challenge, for sure.
It is.
But breaking bad habits is definitely possible.
Okay, how?
Remember the habit loop we talked about earlier?
Cue, craving, response, reward.
To break a bad habit, we need to interrupt that cycle somewhere.
So we can either make the cue invisible,
Yes.
make the craving unattractive, make the response difficult,
Yep.
or make the reward unsatisfying.
Exactly.
Okay, break it down for me.
All right, let's start with making the cue invisible.
Give me an example.
Let's say you want to stop mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Okay.
The cue might be seeing your phone on your desk.
Right. It's right there tempting me.
So what could you do?
Put it away somewhere.
Put it in a drawer, another room, anywhere. It's less accessible.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Right.
You're removing those visual triggers that set the habit in motion.
But what if you can't remove the cue completely?
Good point. Sometimes those cues are unavoidable.
They're just part of our daily routine or environment.
So in those cases, we can try to make the craving unattractive.
Make the craving unattractive. How do you do that?
It's about changing how we think about the habit.
Okay.
Highlight those negative consequences.
Instead of the short-term rewards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on how good that bag of chips tastes,
I could think about how sluggish I feel afterward,
you got it.
or how it upsets my stomach.
You're reminding yourself why you want to break the habit.
Emphasizing those downsides to make it less appealing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the more you associate the habit with those negative outcomes,
Yeah.
the weaker the craving becomes.
Okay, so make the cue invisible, make the craving unattractive,
What's next?
make the response difficult.
Right. Increase the friction.
So if I'm trying to stop staying up late watching TV, I could unplug the TV and put it away each night.
You could.
So it's less convenient.
Exactly. You're adding extra steps, making it harder to indulge in the habit.
What about using technology to help with this?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Like setting time limits on certain apps
You could do that.
or using website blockers to prevent access during certain times,
Exactly. You're increasing the effort required
making it less automatic.
and less likely to happen without thinking,
It's like setting up roadblocks.
making those bad habits run an obstacle course.
But even with those roadblocks, we might still slip up.
It happens.
So what do we do then? How do we make the reward less satisfying?
Because even when we know a habit is bad,
Yeah.
there's often something pleasurable about it.
That keeps us coming back.
We need to find ways to make that reward less appealing.
Okay, I'm listening.
One strategy is to focus on those immediate negative consequences.
So if I eat a bunch of sweets,
Mm-hmm.
I could remind myself about the sugar crash that always follows,
You
or how it makes my stomach feel.
Exactly. Emphasize those short-term downsides.
To counteract the short-term pleasure.
Right. It's about taking away the fun.
Making the habit less rewarding in the moment.
And sometimes it's helpful to introduce a new competing reward.
Oh, that's interesting.
Instead of rewarding yourself with ice cream after a long day,
Okay.
what could you do instead?
Maybe take a relaxing bath.
You could.
Or read a good book.
Exactly. You're replacing that unhealthy reward with a healthier alternative.
That still provides a sense of enjoyment.
It's about rewiring those reward pathways in our brains.
Creating new associations that are aligned with our goals.
And as we weaken the reward associated with the bad habit
Mm-hmm.
and strengthen the reward associated with the good habit
We start to tip the scales in our favor.
towards those behaviors that support our well-being.
It's incredible how these small adjustments can make a big difference.
They really can.
It's about understanding how habits work,
And using that knowledge to our advantage.
becoming architects of our habits,
Designing the behaviors we want to keep.
and the ones we want to eliminate.
Exactly.
So as we continue exploring atomic habits,
Hmm.
let's remember that breaking bad habits isn't about perfection.
It's not about beating ourselves up for slip-ups.
It's about understanding the cues, the cravings, the responses, the rewards
And using that understanding to interrupt the cycle.
to weaken those bad habits.
And as we get better at this,
Yeah.
we empower ourselves to make real, lasting changes.
One small step at a time. Welcome back to our deep dive into atomic habits.
We've covered a lot of ground so far.
We have all these strategies for building those good habits and breaking those bad ones.
Right, but let's be real.
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
It's not always a smooth ride.
Even with the right tools and techniques, sometimes those doubts creep in.
Those doubts.
Yeah, those thoughts that make us question if we can actually change.
Like, we're not good enough or we'll never be able to stick with it.
Exactly. Those can be tough to deal with.
They really can.
Yeah.
How do we silence those inner critics and stay focused?
It's important to remember,
Yeah.
our feelings aren't always reality.
Okay, so our feelings can be misleading.
They can think of them as data points, not directives.
What do you mean?
They don't have to control our actions.
Okay, so we can feel one way and still choose to act differently.
Exactly.
So how do we do that?
Mindfulness can be a powerful tool.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, it's about noticing those thoughts and feelings as they come up.
Without judgment.
Exactly. Just observe them.
And then?
Then you choose how you want to respond.
Okay, so if I'm feeling anxious,
Mm-hmm.
I can acknowledge that feeling,
Right.
but I don't have to let it control me.
You can choose to take a few deep breaths, focus on the present moment.
Okay, and take things one step at a time.
By practicing mindfulness, we gain self-awareness,
We learn to manage our emotions.
which is incredibly helpful when those negative thoughts threaten to derail us.
It's like building a mental muscle.
It is.
Mhm.
And like any muscle, it takes practice to strengthen it.
But over time, we create space between our emotions and our actions.
giving us more freedom to choose how we respond.
So it's not about getting rid of those negative thoughts completely,
Not necessarily. It's more about learning to manage them.
so they don't control us.
Exactly. And that's where reframing comes in.
Reframing.
It's about